George Freshman, 2010.
My name is George Freshman. I was born in Poland, November 10th, 1925. In Grudziądz, a shtetl in Poland. The youngest son of Hannah and Manuel. There were 2 sons and 2 daughters in my family. Grudziądz was a small town with a population of about 10,000 people. About 60% of the people were Jewish. Poland was invaded in November 1939. A week later, the SS Gestapo arrived in black uniforms, armed with a swastika on their arms. On their heads, they had a death emblem on their head. The first thing they did was to round up 400 Orthodox Hasidic Jews. And they marched them to the cemetery to dig their own grave and shot them right there. They terrorized the Jewish people and were able, those, to run to Russia, the able ones. A week later, my brother, sister, and brother-in-law fled to Russia, together with many Jewish people. A few days later, I also walked in the direction to join my brother and my sister. But when I got to the neutral zone between the Russians and the Germans, that Poland was divided, I was longing for my mother at that time. So I turned back and I walked back for 1 week to meet my mother. About 1939, a few days after I returned home, they formed the Grudziądz ghetto in April 1940. The Nazis liquidated Grudziądz ghetto. They only left about 20 tradespeople. The rest they sent to Warsaw Ghetto. While in Warsaw Ghetto, I ran away several times, climbing the wall, and other times through the sewer, searching for food for my family that I did steal from the farmers. I remember once I went to my hometown and I was caught together with 5 more boys. They took us to a garage. We were instructed not to move our bowels, otherwise we will be killed. We were also forced to be on our knees with pebbles underneath. One of the boys couldn't hold it and he was shot on the spot. One Nazi took me by my black bushy hair and whirled me around until he remained with the handful of hair. Half of my hair remained in his hand. They sent us back to Warsaw Ghetto. A week later, I escaped again through the sewer system. I went to my hometown again, holding to the back of a buggy. I looked for my watchmaker teacher, one of the few tradespeople that remained in the Grudziądz ghetto. A few days later, the Nazi took head of the tradespeople and placed him undressed in a barrel. It was winter time, very cold and full of snow. And this was in 1940. A lot of snow on the ground. We were all forced to fill up with snow, plus watching while he froze to death. The SS kicked the barrel and we only saw snow inside right after we were tracked to Warsaw Ghetto. 2 months later, someone smuggled me out. Sister and me, we went to some relatives in Białobrzegi, which was a small town and a ghetto. My father joined us in the ghetto a couple of months later. While in Białobrzegi around November 1942, the Nazi took me away from my mother My mother refused to let go of me, so they hit her with a bat over her head. I never saw nor heard from my mother and sister again. They took me to Radom concentration camp. In Radom, I worked in the ammunition factory. After being in Radom for about a year, we were sent to Auschwitz for a selection only, to die or to work. I was not a candidate to be selected to work because I was very small and thin. I hid and leaned on the shoulder of my husky friend who was in front of me and taller than me. The famous Nazi Mengele, who was the selector of who is going to live or die, was making a selection, and with his pencil said, "You to the right and you to the left." From Auschwitz, they transported us to Weihingen labor camp in Germany. I was in Weihingen for about 3 months, defusing exploded bombs. From Weihingen, they took us to the Unterrichsingen labor camp. They forced us to work for several days. I worked with only one wooden shoe. I worked in a construction for about 3 months. From Unterrichsingen labor camp, they sent us to Kochendorf concentration camp. I worked in the staff mines for about 3 months digging salt. About February 1945, they marched us to Dachau concentration camp in Germany. In Dachau, we were supposed to be exterminated. I had tuberculosis then and all kinds of diseases. I was liberated on May 8, 1945. A few days later, I would have died. I was so sick and couldn't stand up. I was like a skeleton. They sent me to a quarantine in Garmisch-Partenkirchen in the mountain for about a month. After recuperation, an American soldier took a photo of me in my uniform that I was wearing for several years. When I first put on the uniform at only 14 years, it was so long on me. 5 years later, even with little food, during that time the uniform was 6 inches too short. I still have the photograph. After recuperated from, were sent to UNRWA in Stuttgart, Germany, Jewish Organization for Displaced People. I went to Poland to look for relatives. I found no one. The Polish Liberation Army was slaughtering returning Jews. Many of us fled Poland and returned to Stuttgart. In Stuttgart, everybody was looking for relatives. My sister and my brother found me in Stuttgart. I worked with my brother in the jewelry business for 4 years, waiting for a country to accept me. I was supposed to immigrate to Israel, but the British government blockaded it. Instead, they sent me to the USA in May 1949. I lived with my sister in New York for about a month. I went to Charleston, South Carolina, to a family friend of my girlfriend's family, who later married in August 1949. We had 2 daughters. One was born in 1959, youngest one in 1954. Both are artists. My wife Lisa and I divorced in 1970 and later died in 1977. I remarried Malka in 1971. We moved to Florida in 1980. I am the happiest person in the world. I remember the past, but I enjoy and live the present. The only relatives that survived from the war were my brother, my older sister, who passed away in 1990 at the age of 72. 5 first cousins who immigrated to Israel before the war, and 2 second cousins that lived in Florida. The most difficult experience during my Holocaust was the Nazi hit my mother over her head when she refused to give me away. Now my life is collections, seems more dream than history. I hope this never happens again. My name is George Freshman.
Okay, everyone, that's my dad. The video was done by Robert Sutz in his studio, and my stepmom Malka wrote that speech for him as opposed to an interview with questioning. This was a very good synopsis of his experiences, and you can see how remarkable he is. So I'm just keeping this as a record, just to have an extra copy just in case, because it took me so long to find it. It was in zachor.com, ZACHOR.com. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. And actually, his first child was born in 1950, and then I'm the second child, 1954. So also he left out the fact that his dad, my grandfather, who was a shoemaker in Poland, well, that's in my book, I think. It's in the painting I did, gave him a toolkit, which he kept throughout the war until they took it away from him at Dachau. A toolkit with all kinds of tools, watchmaking tools, a little hammer, a little screwdriver, odds and ends, and that really helped a lot, and acting like a clown and doing stuff for people. Speak to you later. Ciao for now. Okay.